fans and for everyone who's listening in and so on, before we talk some of your memories and your time in the business, just how are you doing these days and what are you up to?
I'm sorry, I lost you there.
That's my Irish accent.
Yes.
Just before we talk your memories of the business, just how are you keeping these days and what are you up to and so on?
Well, a long time ago I started a construction company, and Father Time caught up with me, and I didn't want to be 20 feet in the ground. So I sold my construction business to my youngest son, Jason, and I got bored very quick, so I started buying rental property, and I've really enjoyed it, and it's kind of like an adult Monopoly game. I really have a lot of fun buying and selling, and buying at auctions and selling at auctions, and so that's how I support my lifestyle. But now the wrestling business was very structured, and you really didn't have any time. It was 80 and 100 and 110 hours a week.
Yeah.
It was just working all the time. And then I got into construction, and it was confining also. What I'm enjoying the most now is that I can do other things. Like I just got back from signing a lease. I'm opening a coffee shop.
Cool. With
some friends of mine. And, that'll be a fun little project. But other than that, I just play Monopoly.
How did you get into the wrestling business originally? Did you have a family link to it, or was it just something you were drawn to?
My mother sold tickets. She was a ticket seller at the local matches here in Nashville. And, excuse me, my mother was a single mother, and so she would take me and my sister with her, and we would sit in the box office while she sold the tickets. And so I literally grew up at the wrestling match. And when I got up, 7 or 8, 9 years old, the promoter, Nick Goulas, asked me if I wanted to sell the wrestling program. So I jumped at it and sold the Slamagram. That was the name of the program. And went from there to taking up tickets. And then because I was the only person in the family that drove, I got a hardship license when I was 14.
Yeah.
And that's when I started promoting. And I promoted until I went to college. And so I took a little 4-year hiatus from the business, and then I went back because for a 15, 16-year-old kid promoting matches, if I made $100, I was the rich kid on the block. And so, I enjoyed it. I liked the excitement. I liked the business. I was a huge wrestling fan, so to tell you the truth, I'd have done it for free, but I enjoyed making the money. And, one thing led to another. I met Tojo Yamamoto, and he talked me into letting him start training me. And then I started out first as a referee and then a wrestler. But my heart and soul was always in the promotion end. So I had an opportunity, and I bought into the business, and ultimately I bought my partners out.
Yeah. I mean, you meant...
So wrestling business in a nutshell.
You mentioned Toji Yamamoto there. Obviously, he trained you, and you teamed with him, and you were involved, obviously, in the early days with Jackie Fargo and stuff. Just how much of an influence were they on you in your early days in the business?
Well, of course, as we go through life, everybody we meet is an influence.
Yeah.
And then if we are around those people, a particular person, days and weeks and months and years, they all impact us in either positive or negative ways. So, absolutely, Jackie Fargo was a huge influence on me and helped teach me the entertainment aspect of the business. Kojo, of course, but all of the wrestlers. I learned something from every one of them, all the way up until I got out of the business.
Obviously, you said that you enjoyed the promoting aspect of it, but what led to you getting involved with the CWA and its formation? Why did you decide to make that jump?
Okay, the Goodless Welch promotion
Yep.
Was a member of the NWA Wrestling Alliance, and basically all of the what we referred to as legitimate promotion offices were NWA affiliated.
Yep.
But then my business mentor in this business was Eddie Graham, who was the promoter in Florida.
Yeah.
And he didn't like the direction that the NWA was going, and the NWA kind of began to fall apart about the same time that Vince McMahon did his expansion.
Yeah.
So when the fans kind of expected for there to be an affiliation, for the promotion to be a member of the alliance. So I said, okay, I don't want to be in the NWA anymore. Excuse me.
Okay.
So I'll just form my own. So I made up CWA. And then that lasted for a while, and I bought the Von Erichs in Texas. I bought their promotion.
Yep.
And formed the USWA. And then I didn't want to have, two alliances because my talent was wrestling out from the Tennessee territory, was wrestling out in Dallas. And that show was on ESPN. So there was some overlap in exposure to the fans. So I said, well, okay, I'll just make it all USWA. And of course we did wrestling programs that made the transition where it would fit into the storyline. And that's the history of NWA, CWA, USWA.
Just how important, I mean, obviously, his standing in wrestling obviously has changed now with his links to the WWE, but just how important in those days was Jerry Lawler, do you think, to the success of what was happening in Memphis?
Tremendous. Jerry was and is, in my opinion, the best wrestling talent across the board of anybody I ever was involved with or promoted. And of course, that's a stellar list that is Sting and Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and everybody.
Yep.
And the reason is that Jerry could literally do it all. He could make interviews, he could lead a match, he was believable. And so I started Jerry out with a 10% ownership, and as time went on, he ended up as a 50-50 partner. So he had a dynamic impact on our success.
Now, you also mentioned about you buying world class from the Von Erichs. Just how did that merger or that buyout come about? Did they approach you, or what happened to lead to that?
Kerry Von Erich called me one day and said, we didn't make it when my dad stepped out of the business, and we're filing for bankruptcy. And I just thought, before we throw away all this history, because I really enjoyed working for you when I did, wondered if you'd have any interest. And I said, no, I don't think so. Well, my wife was sitting on the sofa and overheard the conversation. And afterwards she said, well, I'm really surprised that you didn't at least take a look at it. And I said, well, it's way out in Dallas. And she said, yeah, but you've always talked about the Von Erichs and what a good promotion they had. Don't you think you ought to look at it? So I thought for a minute, picked up the phone and called him back and said, I'll come out and look at it. So when I went out there, it was amazing to me that they were about 100,000 in debt, and their television distribution company that was run by Max Andrews, he was about 50,000 in debt. So I was surprised that's all they were closing the doors.
Yeah.
Over that amount. So I went to the owner of the Sportatorium and said, rather than close up, will you take and let me keep promoting in the building and pay you a little each week toward the debt, and of course I'll pay the rent. So he was, he was a smart businessman. He knew that that was a good deal, as opposed to the alternative was zero.
Yep.
And then I went to Channel 10, which was the superstation there in Dallas, and essentially made the same deal with them. But they owed the television $30,000-$40,000. And I said, I can pay you back, and I forget the amount, but X number of dollars a month, if you'll keep me on the air. And they agreed, because they didn't agree right away. They called Channel 5 in Memphis, because they didn't know me from anybody. And Ron Clayman told them of our success and our ratings, and gave me an approval, a high approval. So one station manager to the other when it carried some weight, and so they put us back on the air, and I got busy and kind of duplicated this, the promotion methods that I had in Tennessee, in Memphis, and all of Tennessee, and the Mid-South here, and what had worked in Atlanta when I promoted there a few years earlier. So, you know, it took off, and we went from first night I opened up matches that you could have gone dove hunting in the sportatorium and not hurt anybody. I mean, there was just nobody there.
Yeah.
But either 4 or 5 weeks later, we sold it out. And so then it was a cakewalk from then on. And then the Von Erichs they had terrible drug problems.
Yeah.
And it got to where, although they went from making nothing to, I was cutting them checks for $20,000 and $25,000 a month each. That wasn't enough to support their habits. And, so they pulled a power play, and I just said, you know, fellas, y'all were broke when I came out here, and you'll be broke again. I'm going back to Hendersonville, where my home was. And sure enough, 9 months later, they closed the doors again.
Right.
Because they just, you know, they were very good wrestlers, particularly Kerry. He was one of the best in the business. But they had not a clue about business. I mean, you know, when I went out there on the office, they had utility bills and all kind of stuff laying up on the desk that was, you know, some of them were 6 months old. They didn't even open the mail. So, you know, it's very tragic, and they all ended up tragic. I think the only one that's left alive is Kevin.
Yep. I mean, obviously that indirectly led, as you said, to you forming or stepping out as the USWA. Now, obviously, this year sees Paul Bearer, or the late Bill Moody, going into the WWE Hall of Fame. Now, obviously, he was with yourselves as Percy Pringle III. What memories do you have? What memories do you have of him when he was with you?
Percy was lived and breathed the wrestling business. So, you know, when I got out there, he was almost prayerful that I would come out, because you know, he loved it, and that was his home. And so I didn't know him, but I found out he was a great manager and a great talent, as well as being a great person. And he and I became dear friends until his death.
I mean, how one of the other major things that's synonymous with Memphis was obviously the whole Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler deal. How did that come about? What led to that?
Yeah, well, Andy just was a huge wrestling fan and loved it. And in his comedy routine, he incorporated in that he was the intergender wrestling champion of the world. And Andy had a little bit of amateur background, at least enough to defend himself.
Yep.
And so he would challenge the women wrestlers in the nightclub, the women, to come up and wrestle. And so he decided he would take this act into real wrestling, or, you know, the real promotion.
Yep.
And so he tried Vince McMahon, and he tried Vern Gagne, and finally somebody told him, call Jerry Jarrett, and he did. And I said, Andy, I watched you on Taxi. You don't look like a tough guy, and we've got some really tough women down here in the South. And he said, oh, I can handle them. And I said, well, I don't know if you can or not. Your comedy routine, you put up $5,000. I said, I think some people can beat you. Oh, don't worry about it. I'll put up the purse. So we brought him down and had a little run with him. And it's like, we were kind of a secret down here in Memphis, but in the whole history of Memphis, the box office success of the Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman, was puny compared to Jackie Fargo and Al Green, which nobody knows about. But they sold the Mid-South Coliseum out 7 consecutive Monday nights. Elvis couldn't do it, the circus couldn't do it, nobody had did it before, and nobody's done it since. So, I'm a little bit defensive when somebody defines our wrestling promotion by the Andy Kaufman.
Yep.
I mean, it was great. And Andy is one of the finest people that I've ever met. Just a gentle, kind soul that loved wrestling as much as I've ever seen anybody. But because it got the national attention, sometimes it's blown out of proportion what it was. It was like a season, and I've been in the wrestling business for 50 years, or I was, and it was less than a year of that time. So you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
It was great, but it was just another wrestling angle.
Yeah.
If you added up, we did an angle that became known as the Tupelo Concession Brawl.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of that or not, but it was a match that we had in Tupelo, Mississippi, and they fought from the ring and the concession stand.
Yeah.
And that angle probably drew 200 times as much as the Lawler Kaufman. Because it sold out every night, everywhere it went, every town it was in, for over a year. So you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But Andy was great, and it was, I measured things by the box office. So the things that I'm proud of is the Jackie Fargo Al Green program that sold out 11,400 people for 7 consecutive weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
Jerry Lawler wrestled Jack Briscoe in a program called The Quest for the Title, and that program was phenomenally successful for over a year. One program lasted a year. In the modern times, the program's lucky that it goes 2 months.
That's the truth. I mean, coming forward a little bit there, I just wanted to know if there was any truth behind this, and that there's been a lot of talk that in the early 1990s, in 1991, that there was going to be some sort of planned Jerry Lawler Lex Luger feud in a USWA WCW tie-over, but that it was dropped because allegedly Paul Heyman had leaked word that this was going to happen, and so it didn't happen, and they went with Rick Rude as his surprise at Fall Brawl of that year. Was there any truth to that, or were there plans to run with some sort of feud? Or?
You're talking about when Jerry Lawler was going to run against us? I didn't follow you.
Sorry, okay. There was talk of like an inter-promotional program between Jerry Lawler and Lex Luger. I think Ric Flair had just been fired and from WCW, and there was talk that there was a planned taping to be held in Memphis, and that this was going to kickstart like a Jerry Lawler Lex Luger feud, but that Paul Heyman had allegedly leaked this information to reporters or to the dirt sheets or whatever, and that this entire angle was therefore it didn't happen. I just wondered what truth there was behind that, or if there was ever any plan for a WCW tie-in with yourselves in Memphis.
That you're describing, I don't have any knowledge of.
Okay.
I don't recall. The history between WCW and USWA, on a business standpoint, is the WCW, the Turner Company,
Yep.
over-projected their rating. And so they had enormous commercial makeups. So we went to them and said, we will run your commercials in our show for X number of dollars. And that will fulfill the eyeballs that your sales force has sold. So that's from, and we did it. You know, that was from a business standpoint.
Yep.
Our television ad sales guy was a man named Rick Pack. I have had, you know, I don't know if you read my book. I was called by just about every regime that WCW had.
Yep.
And interviewed about running their wrestling division. I didn't accept any of them because I didn't think they could succeed under their circumstances.
Yeah.
Because they were first and foremost a corporate entity, and they wanted the wrestling to fit into that, and it won't work. Vince McMahon is a huge corporation now.
Yeah.
But the center of that corporation is his wrestling business. And so, and that's the way it has to do. It's a concept kind of thing. You know, if you're making widgets or nuts and bolts, you can lay out rules and regulations and stamps and make a half-inch bolt and a 1-inch bolt, and all it is changing the dies in the machine. Wrestling is not like that. Wrestling, the corporation has to support the wrestling.
Yeah.
And so anyway, none of them would or could do that. They wouldn't give the wrestling the autonomy that I felt like it had to have, so I didn't take the job. And so there was a lot of talk. I actually was a consultant for a year when Eric Bischoff was there.
Okay.
But I think I've covered all of the... Oh, I tried to buy them once.
When was that? Was that when they went under in 2001?
Yeah. I had an investment group in Boston that was going to put up a whole lot of money. But I think they had already made a deal with Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
So otherwise, I don't, you know, Lex Luger came from New York. I booked Lex when I was up there working with Vince.
Yeah.
So I brought him down here, and he in fact did wrestle against Lawler. But what you described, I have no knowledge.
Okay. Well, when you, or just before we leave the USWA, obviously you had a talent arrangement for a while with Vince in the early 90s, when you had some of their guys coming down to Memphis and so on, and then Jerry was obviously on their TV. Was there ever any talk of you taking a job sort of full-time or working with the WWF at that point, working with Vince? Or were you just...
Well, you know, when Vince had his steroid problems, I went up there.
That was 94.
I worked up there. Then when Vince got exonerated, I came home. Now, you know, several times Vince and I talked, and he expressed strong interest in me coming back.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to do that. I'm a Southern boy, and I didn't want to be away from my wife and children. And to work for the WWE, Vince is a workaholic.
Yeah.
And thinks that it's normal to work 18 hours a day. And unless you're willing to do that, it's almost impossible to be in that inner circle.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to do that. When I would be up there, we'd work all day, maybe get in from a town we'd all flown to, and then work all day. And I was staying out at Vince's house, and Linda would say good night and go to bed, and Vince I'd almost doze off going to sleep sitting on his sofa, and Vince would be wired like it was 7 o'clock in the morning at 2 o'clock at night. And I really wanted to go to bed at 10. So, you know, you just have to know that Vince's success comes from part of it comes from his work ethic.
Yeah.
He will just outwork everybody else.
I mean, when you talked just a few minutes ago about how you were trying to put together a deal to buy WCW, but they had sold to Vince. Did that then lead you to spark up the interest to set up TNA, or did that come from a separate idea, or?
No. The TNA came about a simple father trying to make his son's dreams come true.
Yeah.
I was out of the business. I'd sold the Tennessee territory to Jerry Lawler.
Yep.
And I had a terrific construction development business going. And Jeff burned a bridge with Vince McMahon, and WCW went out of business, and Jeff was not flourishing on the independent circuit, as nobody does. And he didn't want to come into construction and wanted to be in the wrestling, in the wrestling business. So I finally agreed, okay, we'll start your own wrestling company. And that's how TNA got started.
I mean, obviously there were issues within it, and it's the way that things went down with TNA and so on, but in hindsight, do you regret it, or do you think that you would have done the same again, if you know what I mean?
Do I regret starting TNA?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Because it in fact cost me Jeff and I have a strange relationship. We don't talk. And, that I blame the wrestling business.
Yeah.
And, difficult for, for me. Several things happened. It'd take a whole book for me to tell you about it. But,
yeah.
No, I wouldn't, I regret doing it. I think that it was it wasn't good for our family. And, but Jeff has a passion about him, and, I hear on the internet just what you hear, that he and,
and Toby Keith, yeah.
Toby Keith are going to start another wrestling company.
Yeah, I think they're talking of announcing something the day after WrestleMania, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just, I have, something under close to 40 properties, and it just takes all of my time to manage them. There's always a refrigerator that's on the blink, or something needs done. And, so I don't have a lot of time to follow wrestling.
Well, just as we sort of tie things up, just from your point of view, how do you, like, looking back, how do you view yourself as having influenced the industry, or where do you think your standing is in it?
I think after I'm dead and gone, my legacy will be that I started a whole lot of wrestlers into the business that became superstars.
Yeah.
And, I tried to convey that method to Jeff and the Carters at TNA, and I never was successful at conveying what I did best, and that's turn a wrestler into a wrestling superstar.
Yeah.
I think that's my big contribution to the business, was the Hulk Hogan's and the Stings and the Ultimate Warriors and the Randy Savages and the Jerry Lawlers of the world. I think I contributed and kind of taught them how to expand their character, or help teach them.
Yep.
It's back to what we were talking about. Everybody is an influence of it. The Rock was in Memphis at the same time that the Road Dogg, Jesse James, who I understand is back with.
Yes, he's there with Vince now. Yeah.
But he was there, and The Rock heard Brian James go to the ring and get on the microphone, and his stick and his deliverance.
Yeah.
And Rock took that and added his own touch to it and creativity, and became a mega millionaire and one of the biggest box office attractions that our business has ever seen. But as you pass through life and rub shoulders with people, I firmly believe that everybody leaves an imprint on you. If you don't do anything except have a 5-minute conversation with them.
Yeah.
Kind of a crazy philosophy, but that's what I believe.
listen, thank you so much for, as I said at the start, for giving me your time today. It's been also from a.
Well, I've enjoyed it. I love walking back down memory lane every once in a while, and I hope you do well in your efforts. And I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, say thank you very much. To say for the fans, it'll be really good to hear sort of the stuff you said, but from a personal point of view, it's been because obviously I may be involved in interview a lot of guys, but I'm a fan at heart, and it's been just really fascinating for me to listen to it all as well and listen to what you've been saying. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that. Stay in touch.